Alrighty, everybody, welcome back. Rusty here with the Rugby Review, and this episode I'm going to get you caught up on Round 9 action across the URC. With that being said, let's take a quick look at the games that were played during Round 9. 2 games New Year's Day, 1 game January 2nd, and then 5 games that Saturday, January 3rd. And let's take a look at the final results that happened across these games. So January 1st featured 2 Welsh derbies. Game 1 was between Dragons and Scarlets. One-sided affair here, Dragons winning 28-5. And Game 2 was played between Ospreys and Cardiff. Much closer game here. But Ospreys came out with the victory, winning 33-22. Only 1 game on January 2nd, which to me this was one of the more surprising results of the week. We had the Irish derby of Ulster versus Munster. Ulster 28, Munster 3. So, bit lopsided there. Surprise for me, maybe not for the Ulster fans. And then January 3rd, 5 games played. Game 1 was the first of 2 South African derbies this week. We had Sharks versus Lions, super close game. Sharks 22, Lions 23. And then the second South African derby, another close game here, Stormers versus Bulls. We had Stormers 13, Bulls 8. Game 3, another close game between Benetton and Edinburgh. Benetton 14, Edinburgh 15. And the last 2 games here were one-sided affairs. So Game 4 for January 3rd was the second Irish derby, Leinster versus Connacht. Leinster 52, Connacht 17. Last but not least was Game 5, Glasgow versus Zebri Parma. You have Glasgow 47, Zebri Parma 10. So let's dive into each one of these games real quick and get everybody caught up on the stats for the games. And the first game we're going to be going through is Dragons versus Scarlets. So again, one-sided game here where it was a very dominant performance by Dragons. And it's going to be a bit interesting because Scarlets were much more of the dominant offensive team, but did not do a very good job converting their opportunities. And Dragons they used a really strong defensive effort to fuel their offense, to be very efficient, and score more tries. So let's take a closer look. And if we look at the top half here, you can see possession and territory are favoring Scarlets in the red ink. And the tackles made stat for Scarlets is about half, or literally half, of what the Dragons had to do. So this is showcasing Scarlets had more possession, or holding the ball more, playing more offense, and putting the Dragons under defensive pressure in their own half more. But Scarlets were not able to convert their opportunities when they had them, as the final score showcases. And then if we look down even further at the bottom of the slide with meters gained, Dragons 236 meters gained to Scarlets 344. Again, just showcasing a huge offensive game for the Scarlets, but with very, very poor conversion ratios. If we look a little further, just a little further down the stat sheet here, Scarlets even had more turnovers once. They're putting in a little bit of a better defensive effort turnovers-wise, but they have a little bit more handling errors, and they were much more ill-disciplined this week than the Dragons were. 15 penalties. It's too much. It's too big of a hole to climb out of. I mean, truthfully, the only way this could have been a closer game is if the Dragons gave up just as many penalties, but the fact that they were hanging 10-11 at the 11 range is so much better for them when the Scarlets are giving away just a huge amount of penalties, 15, it's so many that they just could never come back from that. The next game we're going into is the second Welsh Derby. We have Ospreys versus Cardiff. Fairly close game. Ospreys were, in fact, the better team, stronger team. Cardiff had to put in a huge shift defensively just to minimize the damage here. And so what we'll see, zooming in on the top half here, possession plus territory favoring the Ospreys in the black ink. And again, Cardiff in the blue ink had to make a huge number of tackles just with how much defensive pressure they were under and how often they were in their own half. So you can see that by tackles made, 204 tackles made for Cardiff to 140 for the Ospreys. Now what's interesting is if you go down to the bottom of the slide, is Cardiff was the team that was much more effective with ball in hand when they had it. So meters gained, 466 meters gained for Ospreys, which is a huge number. And then 492 for Cardiff, which is absolutely massive, considering they only had possession 44% of the time. And they just had so much territory pressure as well. Now, the one thing that I guess kind of helped the Ospreys offset their handling errors was the number of penalties that Cardiff conceded, because Ospreys did not have a very disciplined game here offensively, giving the ball up 9 times to literally 0 times for Cardiff. However, Cardiff kind of counterbalanced that with 15 penalties there. So, Ospreys didn't do themselves any favors, but Cardiff most certainly didn't either, giving away 15 penalties. And Cardiff was the much better team offensively if we look down at defenders beaten and how that translated into more clean breaks. So each team both had 21 defenders beaten. Ospreys had 8 clean breaks, whereas Cardiff had 12. So, it was, all told, based off some of the offensive stats throughout here, strong performance by Cardiff, but these penalties just killed them by the end of the game, and they just couldn't overcome it. Now, one of the more surprising games of the week is next, which is the Munster-Ulster game. To me, this was one of the more surprising results, just given how well how well Munster has been playing during the course of the season. Now, Ulster obviously has been playing well themselves and definitely showcased it here during this game. So let's take a look at the top half here. What we're going to see is a very dominant performance by Ulster and very much a lot of defensive pressure was exerted on Munster during the course of this game. So possession plus territory both heavily skewed towards Ulster in the red ink, both 60+% for Ulster. Look down at tackles made. This is showcasing the huge amount of defense and defensive pressure that Munster was under during the course of this whole game. 227 tackles made by Munster to just 131 for Ulster. It's a huge difference there. Huge amount of defense being played by Munster, and obviously you can see that with possession and territory as well. This point is also emphasized with meters gained. 229 meters gained for Munster to 407 for Ulster. Huge difference there as well. Again, just showcasing Ulster is the team that is being the dominant offensive team this particular game. And these stats kind of prove that as well. Ulster, much more disciplined this game than Munster. Penalties conceded for both teams, 10 for Munster to just 5 for Ulster, and then Ulster was very clinical, having a lot of defenders beaten, converting that to a lot of clean breaks. So again, very strong game for Ulster here, and Munster just got the pants beat off of them this week. Now our next game is the first of two South African derbies. We have the Sharks versus the Lions here. So, as you can see by the final score, Sharks 22, Lions 23. Incredibly close game between the two this week. It was won by a last-second score from the Lions. And so you'll see that across almost the entire stat sheet here, just how close and evenly matched these two teams were. Possession and territory slightly favors the Sharks, 52% for each, which then makes sense that the Lions are making a little bit more tackles, 117 tackles made for the Lions to 93 for the Sharks. Now if we zoom in on the bottom half here, I think this is where we can kind of see where Lions may have earned that 1 point edge. Meters gained. 385 meters gained for the Lions to 272 for the Sharks. It's a huge difference here, and telling me here that Lions were much more clinical, much more effective on offense with ball in hand. Now, the one thing that most certainly did not help the Sharks in this game is their turnovers lost. Huge difference here as well. Turnovers lost. 13 turnovers lost for the Sharks to just 2 for the Lions. It's 13 handling errors, 13 times Sharks are coughing up the ball, giving it back to the Lions. And as you can see by meters gained, Lions did not need a second invitation to take advantage of that. And again, if we look down at the bottom half, or just the bottom of the stat sheet here, defenders beaten, clean breaks. Just to emphasize, Lions being slightly more effective on the offensive end, which, again, could have just been that little extra bit for that 1 point margin of victory. Lions had more defenders beaten, which led to more clean breaks. Very strong win for the Lions this week. Tough loss for the Sharks, and we'll see how that affects each team going into the next round. The second South African derby this week, another close game, hugely competitive game here. Very physical game, very strong defense from both teams here. Stormers had a little bit more possession, a little bit more territory, right? Not as evenly matched, so to speak, as the previous game, Lions-Sharks game. A little bit more favored towards the Stormers. Bulls are on the defensive end a little bit more, making more tackles. And then if we really zoom in towards the bottom here, I'm actually pretty surprised that the Stormers were able to keep their perfect record alive, considering how many turnovers lost they had. So, it's pretty impressive how well the Stormers had to play to overcome this many handling errors. In addition, overcoming this many handling errors, plus being effective with ball in hand on offense. So they made more meters, 273 meters gained for the Stormers to just 205 for the Bulls. But again, that turnovers lost. It's 18 turnovers lost for the Stormers and just 9 for the Bulls. It's just a huge difference there. And the Stormers were able to overcome it and get a very close victory over the Bulls this week. Now moving into our next game, we have Benetton versus Edinburgh. This is another very close game this week. And honestly, that's just what you're going to see when we look at these stats here. Possession, territory, not necessarily 50-50, but very close to it. Slight edge to Benetton on the black ink here. Edinburgh had to rely on their defense, as you can see from tackles made. 185 tackles made for Edinburgh to 141 for Benetton. Just a huge difference between the two there. And then if we move down the stat sheet here a little bit, I think biggest difference maker here is turnovers lost. There's a huge number of handling errors for Benetton, coughing the ball up and giving a lot of possession away to Edinburgh, allowing them to have more offensive opportunities. And again, there's a 1-point margin of victory. Edinburgh didn't need a second invitation to take all those handling errors from Benetton. So, very close game here. Benetton, I think, will be thinking to themselves, they lost this game. Edinburgh didn't necessarily beat them. Moving on, we have the other Irish derby this week, and this was a rather lopsided affair pretty much from the get-go. Leinster very much in control. Leinster beat Connacht 52-17. And I think if we just really zoom in on the bottom half of the stats here, that will showcase this very easily. Let's start at the top. Meters gained. 649 meters gained for Leinster in the black ink to 362 for Connacht. That is a gigantic difference, and if you're going to let up over 600 meters during the course of the game, it's just Swiss cheese defense, and there's not very much resistance for Leinster on the offensive side. Now, the impressive thing here is Leinster was very much the more ill-disciplined team, giving away 14 penalties. However, that obviously didn't bite them in the butt this particular week, because if we look at defenders beaten, it's pretty similar actually between the two, but Leinster converted that at a significantly higher rate into a larger number of clean breaks than Connacht did. And obviously, Connacht only scored 17 to the 50-plus for Leinster. Leinster did a great job with scramble defense getting back to keep Connacht from getting too much offensive momentum, even when they did have the ball. Now our next game and final game of the week was another lopsided affair. We have Glasgow versus Zebri Parma, 47 for Glasgow, 10 for Zebri. And, very similar to the Leinster-Connacht game, if we look down at the bottom half here, these stats here will just really emphasize how much stronger of a performance Glasgow had to Zebri. So meters gained, 498 meters gained for Glasgow to 263 for Zebri. Again, Glasgow much more effective, much more clinical on offense, leading to Glasgow having more scoring opportunities, more running opportunities. Now, the interesting thing for Glasgow, that fortunately for Glasgow didn't bite them in the butt this week, is the number of turnovers lost. They had 13 turnovers lost to just 6 for Parma. It's a very big difference between the two there. However, let's look one more line down below that. Penalties conceded. 13 penalties conceded for Parma to just 7 for Glasgow. So, whatever turnovers lost Glasgow had, Parma gave up with the same number of penalties. Now, what's also interesting and very similar to the Leinster-Connacht game is defenders beaten to clean breaks conversion. You have fairly similar number of defenders beaten for both teams, 27 for Glasgow, 24 for Parma. Glasgow did a significantly better job converting the defenders beaten to clean breaks. As you can see, 14 clean breaks for Glasgow to just 5 for Parma. Huge difference between the two there, which, again, As we saw from the final score, Glasgow was the much more clinical, much more effective team offensively, and you can see that with defenders beaten, converting into a large number of clean breaks as well. So that is all of the games for round 9. Let's take a peek at the live ladder here. This is a live ladder as of January 5th. Still have Stormers at the top, leading, still undefeated, clean sweep, 8-0 so far. Not too much has changed other than Munster. Other than Munster falling down to 6th. So that's the biggest change in the top 6. Leinster slowly climbing back up towards the top of the table after a very slow start to the season. And not too many other movements up and down the ladder other than Vodacom Bulls have now fallen even further out of the top 8 after a strong start to their season as well. Connacht also falling out of the top 8 after a good start to their season. And Benetton staying up there with Ospreys climbing up just under the top 8, kind of nipping at the heels of Benetton right now. So again, this is just round 9. Significantly much more movement to come. And here we have round 10. So this will be played in from when round 9 was. Round 10 will be played in a few weeks' time. There will be a 2-week break from round 9 to round 10 for Investec Champions and Challenge Cup. So that's it for the round 9 action. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.